Aloha, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. My name is Sprinklebeard, and today we're going to be doing a look at the Lord for Isolde. So the way I'm pronouncing the name is based upon a rough understanding I know for the German version of pronouncing this name. It is certainly not an American name. So anybody who's upset, or if I call her Isolde, that's what I've been calling her. Because with my tiny American brain, that's how we pronounce it. But it's more along the lines of like Isolde or Isolde. I forget the German pronunciation. It's not something that is native to my American brain. So with that being said, I'm going to be calling her Isolde for the rest of the video. Deal with it or get the hell out. So without further delay, let's get right to it. Isolde is a high block defender. So one of the nicest things is for her being a tank, she is also a lord. So all of these stats that we're about to look at, understand we're going to increase them by about 10%, because her being a lord, she is the epic lord for the Northerners. So she will increase all of these stats by about 10%. So her HP and her defense, they might look a little on the low side, but again, that's because, and as I understand the way Lord skills work in this, it's all of your total stats are started, and then she increases all of your base stats. So these base stats would look nicer, which then means that all of your gear stats after the fact, I said that really sloppily the first time, all of your base stats would increase, which means all of your stat increases. So if you gave her something like HP plus 60% on a piece of gear, that's going to work after her Lord bonus takes this 21802 and increases it by 2180, right? So it's going to go off the 60% is going to go off of the 23 some thousand, maybe even 24,000. But nice stats there. So her cost is 18 with an original block of 3, and I say original block because as we start talking about her, things are going to change. Even when fully promoted, she does only have 3 block, which is weird to me with her being a high block champion, but we do get into that. So first off, let's talk about her talent. She gains a 6% defense bonus for each enemy blocked, stacking up to 5 times. So what this means to me is, logically, she's blocking around 5 champions at some point. 5 enemies at some point, which is absolutely obscene, and it only stacks up to 5 times. So there's absolutely a possibility you could get her into a position where she's blocking 6 champions or above. I haven't seen it yet, but I also haven't messed around with her too much. I kind of have other tanks already, so me getting her, I've kind of just gotten her too late, right? That even if she can block up to 6 things, the problem is I'm working on other tanks, or I have other like legendary things that I want to work on now. So unfortunately, she's going to be at the bottom of my roster for a little bit. But her basic attack. So her basic attack triggers slash for every 7 attacks, dealing AoE damage to all blocked enemies 1 time. And then as we skill her up, she gains extra rage, an additional 8 rage. And it says for the slash. So I'm guessing that like her basic attack, let's say it regenerates her 3 rage on average. I don't know the exact number. It seems like on her slash, she gains more rage, or maybe because she's hitting more enemies, she gains more rage. This is something where the game never tells us exactly how rage regen works. I've kind of done a video on rage regen, but it didn't go super comprehensive into, well, how much does every tank actually get per auto attack? What about every AoE auto attack? Does it generate more rage? Things of that nature. So I could have gone a little bit deeper into the video. That's not the focus of this video, though. So what's nice is every 7 attacks, she gets some AoE slashing damage. Although we don't really depend on our tanks for their damage, what is nice is for like either your newer players, or if you get her early on your account, this is going to feel meaningful, right? Dealing damage to up to 5 enemies, it's going to feel fantastic. So next, let's just talk right about her ultimate shield wall. Increases block for every ally in range by 1, and applies physical damage reduction and magic damage reduction to them. Now, the way that I read this, that makes the most sense with her bonus, like her talent, would be that she increases her block for every ally in range by 1. Not that her allies in range increase their block by 1, and then they also get a physical and damage reduction. This matters, like, when we talk about like English grammar, the way that this is set up, it's two very separate thoughts. Otherwise, you would just combine the thoughts into one sentence, right? It would be for increases the block for every ally in range by 1, and applies these things to them also, or it would be something along those lines. So the way that I'm understanding this is Isolde will be gaining the block, and we'll kind of test this out with champions specifically that can't block. That way I can make sure that she is gaining the block amount. And there's very easy level setups that we can do for this. But really cool ability, right? So the rage cost is 1,000, which is kind of on the high end of things. However, we do have 2 minuses in here. So that would scale down from 1,000 down to 800. So that puts her more into that medium length ult. Her initial rage does go up on 2 of her things. So that is also very meaningful. The physical and magical reductions that she gives to her teammates, they start off at 10%, but they scale up to 30%. And they originally last for 10 seconds, but they scale up to 15 seconds. So that is a very long time to give physical and magical reductions to people. Very, very, very meaningful amounts of stats there. Her passive is called the Northern Guard, which is on auto. So every 30 seconds this will happen. Isolde periodically grants a shield equal to 30% of her max HP to herself and her adjacent allies in a horizontal line. The shield strength increases by 10% each time her block increases by 1. This shield lasts for 10 seconds. So this is why we read through the ultimate first, is that with her ultimate, this is what lets her block more units. So if she's blocking more units, so if she's blocking like 5 units, and the shield strength is increased by 10% each time her block is increased by 1. So if she's blocking 3, but she goes up to 5, this means she would get increased by 2. So this shield would go from 30% of her max HP to a total of 50% in that example. Otherwise, you're probably only blocking an additional like 1 champion, which would mean, you know, an extra 10%, so 40%. When we look at the skill buffs that we get for upgrading her, the shield goes up by 3%, so a total of 12%. I'm sorry, yeah, total of 12%. So it'd go from a base of 30 up to a base of 42%. And then the scaling would go from this 10% for each additional block to 11, 12, 13, 14% per additional block. So in the example that I gave earlier, she's blocking 2, it'd be 14 times 2, which is 28, which then makes a lot of sense with the 42. 42 plus 28 gives you a nice 70%, which is nuts, right? That is so much shield. Now, on top of all of this, she is a lord as well. So she's a Spirit of the North, which is her lord skill. Increases faction allies' basic attributes by 10%. Periodically grants all faction allies a shield equal to 20% of their max HP for 20 seconds. The more faction allies there are on the team, the more frequently this takes place. So not only is her lord skill applying shields to everybody that's in her faction, and that's why the wording of this matters a whole lot, is that now she has a chance to periodically grant a shield to just allies that are standing near her. So if she's standing next to 2 nightmares, she could be granting them a shield, which could be very, very meaningful for them. It could also be for like non-northerners like Comet. So if you're doing a boss fight, her randomly throwing a shield on them potentially lets them live significantly longer. So really, really cool stats in here. A lot of shielding from just one champion. Let's move on to her awakenings. So when Shield Wall, I believe that's her ultimate. Yep, that's the ultimate. So when she gives everybody a physical and magic reduction, and then she increases her block chance. Isolde Isolde gains a number of shields equal to the value of her block. Each shield is equal to 8% of her max HP and lasts for the duration of the shield wall. So in terms of building up this tank, obviously we want to heavily focus on our HP percentages. Defense percentage is also going to be good. And then there's a small reason for attack if you want her to be doing damage. Again, that's not something I typically focus on for my tanks, but if you got her early enough, HP, defense, and attack percentages could all be good stats on her. Here she gets an extra 1200 HP. That is absolutely phenomenal for not only for tank stats, but because her kit scales with HP. I love it. Increases Isolde's attack by 5% of her HP. Absolutely love this. This is what I want to see more of in this game, right? This encourages you to stack a stat on her and then rewards you for building her correctly. I will say it does take away a little bit of creativity from people being like, well, what if I want to build her as an attacker? I get that, but you're still wanting HP on her anyway, so not bad. And then from her awakening too, you get HP, so at minimum, you're getting 5% of that 1200 stacking onto her attack stat. All damage reductions, we love to see this on our tank, right? The less damage that they're taking from physical and magical damage, absolutely valuable. And then her Awakening 5 is, the required number of basic attacks to trigger slash is reduced by 2. So what I don't like about this is, again, I'm not counting on her for her damage here. However, the game apparently does think she is going to output some decent damage. I also dislike the fact that she doesn't like have a shield, or I wish that her weapon, I don't want to say like is like your typical shield, but I wish it was something more used for blocking, right? As a defender class in this, even if it was like, let's say like a larger claymore or like a Zweihander, which is a giant two-handed sword meant for killing horsemen while they're riding their horse. It's literally meant to chop through both the man mounted on the horse and the horse. I think that could have been a little bit better. The Zweihander wasn't really like designed for blocking, but it was a massive heavy sword. So it's one of those things, if you blocked with it, things weren't getting through it. It had so much weight to it, no one was knocking that thing away. Yeah, very, very interesting champion. Very, very team-oriented champion, which I like out of defenders. I think that's a huge thing that more defenders need to lean into, is the concept of they are a team-based champion. They're not like... Baron kind of looks more like a solo tank, like, I'm going to solo tank this and kill everything off. Isolde is more like, no, I'm the people's protector. I'm meant to work with other champions on my team. Let's move on to where is Isolde going to be best used at. So when it comes to our campaign, anywhere where we need a defender, which is a lot of the time, Isolde is going to feel great. And then specifically in boss battles, I absolutely see her being a staple champion if you get her early. Her ability to not only shield other northern champions, like your Voroth and your Harpun or Nocturne, any of these damage dealers, she's going to feel great. I'm not sure if she actually synergizes well with Valkyra. That's something we can test out here in a second. But that is something where giving her the extra ability to block and shield other champions around her is going to be extremely valuable. This also goes for the Void Rift. In the Void Rift, we've already talked numerous times in other videos of how shielded champions often have a huge advantage in here. So her being a Lord, she's going to be constantly applying a shield to all of her faction allies. But then the fact that during her ultimate she can shield allies as well is going to be very valuable. So there's times where you place a champion and then a boss tries to drop some rocks on your head. And that's no fun. So the fact that Isolde can shield them up is going to feel fantastic. In the arena is kind of a tricky one for such a defensive champion. So not only is she defensive, but her Lord skill is also defensive. So yes, there's some argument to say, well, all of your champions would survive anything. But equally, it's kind of difficult, like, unless you got things like Volroth, or if you got other northern champions to take advantage of that shield. So, for instance, I know that Volroth has some of the highest damage of an epic. And then there's champions like Estrid that can put a defensive down on targets. There's Harpin, who gets extra damage when he's shielded, but that is more specifically through his awakenings. And then we have champions like Falsha, who's this girl, Ardea. Ardea has a ridiculous attack stat. There's champions like this that will be able to take advantage of needing those shields. Elder would also be in this. And I think he gets benefit for having shields on. Yeah, when shielded, deals extra damage. So there's plenty of champions in the faction that can take advantage of those shields. The issue or the concern that I have is that you kind of need these other champions. Isolde isn't just putting this shield on everybody. It's only people in this faction. And then any of the platform champions aren't going to need the shield. The faction itself is kind of a little too on the defensive side, where all the champions feel too defensive, or they have great synergy when shielded, which is great, but then you need a Lord skill to proc it. Now, Dagna is very easy to obtain as a rare, so that's not very difficult, but this does make Isolde that bit better, an extra 10%, and then Dagna's shield is only for about 5% of their max HP, so Isolde giving 10% is going to feel absolutely massive to those champions. In the arena, again, it's one of those arguments that I have where you're probably not taking a whole lot of damage constantly. So like in the AoE arena, sustained arena, or single target, yes, if you put a ground troop out, she's more likely to block and help them survive a little bit better. For the AoE, there could be the argument that if you can time her ultimate on certain waves, you could block, 5, maybe 6 enemies from running into the pit. The thing is, like, the smallest wave on the AoE is about 6 units. So that's going to be a very difficult thing to rely on. You're not going to be able to rely on it every wave. And then when Isolde is blocking 3, that's another thing you have to accommodate for, is can your damage dealers hit where Isolde is blocking things, and her gaining that extra block, does that really help her? Because if you put her in that main pit of the arena, you would need things on either side of her to give her the extra block as well. So useful, but very hard for me to justify at the moment. Arena seems like a very big tempo game where you need to be able to outkill from your opponent. However, if you did have the right champions and you wanted to try to outblock your opponent and say, I'm just going to take a lot less damage than you, that is a strategy for sure. So in the raids, where is Isolde going to be useful? So because of her ability to block damage for other champions, I could argue everywhere, right? You can put her in a position where as long as she can block for somebody side by side with her, if they're going to take damage, she's going to be great. So things even like the marksman, where she doesn't have a great place, the fact that she can put a shield on certain people and help them survive could stop you from needing a healer. But I would just argue, why not use a healer? Mages, same kind of argument, putting her in a position where she can block things, and for her to block extra units could be very, very valuable if your damage dealers aren't dealing enough damage to kill things quickly. Having that extra block and having a tank able to do that could be fantastic. Endurance, putting a shield on to prevent that poison damage, absolutely amazing. And then in melee, just helping any of your teammates survive, absolutely brilliant. So very good resources everywhere. Guild boss, there's a small argument that you could bring her here. If your other units, if you got a whole bunch of northern units, so let's say you were like, you get like Volroth, Harpin, and Nocturne very early, I could say yes, you would bring her in because at minimum her Lord bonus is helping. And then probably from all the shielding that she's constantly going to be putting out, a lot of your units would end up surviving longer or not need as much healing attention, which can make your healer's job easier. It lets them heal the targets that are actually low on HP, and that those shields preventing damage lets her heal. Like, let's say Voroth is at half HP and then he gets the shield. That's helpful because then your healer can heal from underneath the shield, get the person back up to full, and that shield is taking damage while she's getting like Voroth back up. Or whoever your healer is. However, it is Guild Boss. Guild Boss, we kind of depend mostly on our damage output, not necessarily our survivability. Although, if your characters are not surviving, they're not putting out damage. So it's kind of that catch-22. Use your best judgment. At minimum, she would be providing somebody like Nocturne an extra 10% of stats. Artifact Material Raid. I would say this is probably one of the best places for her. Not only could she tank, but then she's also providing everybody else on your team extra stats or extra shields if they're part of the faction. So again, I'm going to keep mentioning the Voroth and the Estrid, or any of your other like legendary champions of that faction, like Valkyra. Her gaining a shield so that she can continue to do AoE long range fighter damage is very valuable. So I absolutely love her here. Tide, absolutely invaluable. Absolutely, right? Giving damage reductions to the teammates next to her, giving shields to everybody, having her block extra units. There's just so many good things about her being in Tide here. I absolutely love it. Resource Raid. This is going to be the place where I also show her off. But this is again, a very good place. Who doesn't belong? Is it Greed?
We must retreat. Retreat! Retreat!
Thank you for that, Greed. Isolde.
My duty is torn between...
So we're going to be intentionally goofy here. We're going to turn these guys backwards. And the reason that we're doing this is that we want Isolde to shine here, not the piercers. There we can see there's a small charge up for the animation, but this is what I wanted to see is on this wave. She was able to block 3, and then as things got through, my other champions did turn around. Huh. It looks like she does give blocking to the units side by side with her.
Our mace of magma is ready to kill.
Crap, if they walk in a straight line, this isn't going to work. Whatever, we're going to restart anyways.
May the sun melt their evil.
So it looks like my English and grammar was off. This is something I like about the goblins. They constantly seem to have like a larger hitbox and constantly get stuck on multiple champions. So the two people on either side of her. So yeah, everybody gained a block of +1. I'm a little confused because I would have thought she would have gotten +2. But that's kind of sweet. So for content like this, when you get swarmed with enemies, the fact that you can turn on this extra blocking and make some of your other champions, like this would be super valuable for champions like Wrath and Abomination who want to block, you know, multiple things. I'm curious. Yeah, even Aracha there gained a +1 to block. So it kind of seems like everybody in range, so in this case, Aracha, being back behind, would gain the extra block. So that's very, very valuable information to know. Really cool. Really cool. So all those champions are getting a damage reduction as well as a +1 to block, which I think is pretty crazy to think about. So in these resource raids, and then when you're in the Void Rift, there's kind of like a resource raid that you can do in there. Isolde could help you out if you're not feeling like you have enough damage to kill things off very quickly. You could use Isolde and then have her extra blocking that she gives other fighters be extremely useful. Gear raids. Gear raid 1 is the one place I would say is probably not the best for her. A lot of the bugs do explosive damage, but then they promote up into poison damage. And that poison damage, I don't think would be something that she would block. Now, her shields could be useful, again, if you're using things like Nocturne and Shamir up on the platforms, or Harpun and Maul, that if she's giving them the Lord bonus, and they're constantly getting the shield, that giant ice golem that you see appear in the middle of the map periodically, that is the Lord skill going off and shielding everybody. So there's definitely reasons for her to be in Gear Raid 1, but I would say it's kind of as a static buffer. I don't think I would summon her out to fight specifically. Again, unless she's like your only epic, in which case that's kind of its own thing. Like if you don't have a whole lot of epics, any epic is going to feel good. Sunday, why do you have sticks in your fur? How did you even get sticks this high up in your fur? That's like in your sweater. Gear Raid 2, absolutely. 100% absolutely in Gear Raid 2. There's a lot of times where we need a defender, and all the shields that she provides would help mitigate a lot of the damage from either the Sandstorm, the Ground Pound, from enemies charging into her. The fact that she can be re-shielding constantly, either herself, everyone, her faction allies, people next to her. There's so many reasons to bring her for Gear Raid 2. Gear Raid 3, again, some of the shielding effects, like if you have like things like Maul and Harpun on your team, there would be the absolute reason to bring her to shield them or to give them extra stats for damage. However, she is a ground unit, so she's not going to be able to do any damage, or she's not going to be able to block anything. So understand, she's more of a static buffer for them, or to tank the boss. Like if the boss does tend to target the most recently summoned out thing, so if you need something to be tanking shots, always having your tank summoned out last to tank a boss is fantastic. Faction trials. So she's going to be great everywhere here. So in the basic trial, she's going to be good for offering damage reduction, and the boss likes to scream and hit everybody. So offering damage reduction there or shielding effects is going to be useful. We do prefer mages in here. So if you have things like Shamir and Nocturne, she buffing them up is going to be amazing. Her also being able to block the path reliably and either shield herself or shield others can be super valuable as well. So plenty of reasons to bring her here. And then for the northern faction, in the northern faction trials, you're constantly taking damage from like fire elementals. When you play the level, you'll understand better conceptually. Try not to spoil too much. Her constantly offering shield upon shields is going to be useful. In a recent video I did a cover of Vortex. Isolde is she might actually be up there for, hey, I'm going to challenge Vortex for the amount of shields I put on people. But that's also because she's a Faction Lord. So Faction Lord ability is giving her a massive advantage here for mass shielding everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all I got for you for Isolde. Very, very interesting champ. That block mechanic works incredibly different than what I expected. I am a little confused now. I'll have to do more testing on my own, but I'm kind of given the impression that she can block more than just 4. The way that I was reading this sounds like it scales up higher for each champion that she blocks. Maybe it's because if you give her a certain artifact, there is an artifact that it can increase the number of enemies you block. So maybe it's in addition to that they wanted it to scale with that artifact specifically. But very, very interesting champ. Absolutely love the way that she works. design-wise, I think she looks great. She just looks like a northern, warrior, and everything about it looks good. Yeah, cool northern champion. The North is not really a thing that I'm obsessed with. That's a bus that just missed me entirely. But I think she looks cool. The northern faction in this being very defensive, I do like. I do wish, though, that they had more damage over times. So all of their defensive stats would kind of make more sense, or all their HP stats would make more sense. But it is what it is. A lot of their damage dealers are very, very interesting, though. Like, every single one of them. Like, so Nocturne has some true damage in his kit. Falsha has mixed damage. Ardea is new. So her damage is going to be what it is. Valkyra can AoE target things down. So everybody living longer while she's just constantly AoEing things down would feel great. Maul's got some good AoE. Estridge has a defensive down. Harpin gets ignoring defense when shielded. Voroth has some of the highest attack speed. It's variable attack speed. But he's got some ridiculous attack speed in his kit, as well as some of the highest base damage. But I will say, I do feel like they have too many healers. They have Vortex, they have Madan, they have Lightlock. And then I thought there was a legendary one. Apparently not, which is good. But they have so many shields, having 3 healers isn't really necessary for them. But it's always useful. Guys, tell me what you think. Do you like Isolde? Is she somebody that you're like, oh, all of those shields are kind of interesting. Oh, the extra block. I have this idea for this level now. Or, oh, this level. I can think of a level in the Void Rift where that extra blocking for neighboring allies is going to be absolutely massive. Because I have certain champions that do plenty of damage, but they get out-zerged. So having the extra block is going to be extremely valuable. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button down below. It helps me out a ton. If you want to join us over at twitch.tv/sprinklebeard, we stream every day, Sunday through Wednesday, as long as my schedule allows it. Thank you very much for watching again, and of course, until that next time, ta-ta.